A couple days ago, I got the chance to help playtest a new Vtuber card game named Oshi designed by Japanime Games, and boy howdy, do I have a lot to say about it. It's a position-based card game where you play as your favorite Vtuber, taking on their persona and fighting for subscribers using content and actions to dominate platforms and reach the final goal of 1 million subscribers. It's got a lot of things I like, some things that I don't, but before I can get into those details, let me give you an overview of how the game plays and feels. Players take turns fighting for popularity on different platforms by making content, upgrading their persona, and spending funds to do unique effects. There's content cards, which you play on platforms to increase your influence, action cards, which do special effects like moving other cards, gaining you money, or drawing cards, and then there's upgrades, which give your persona more funds per turn, higher influence, and improving their base ability. Each card, with the exception of platforms, has a color, red, green, or purple, which tend toward a more aggro, economy, or control playstyle. They also have one of the 4 genres, which are Zatsudan, Poggers, Experience, or Creatives. Each player selects a persona to play as, which dictates what cards you are allowed to put in your decks. For example, during Game 1 of my playtest, I was Pipkin Pippa, a red Zatsudan streamer, which meant that I could use any red cards or any Zatsudan cards regardless of their color. The game is played in rounds, and there are 3 phases to each round. The content phase, where you move your persona to a platform and then take turns playing content and action cards to increase your standing. The platform phase, where you compare your influence in hopes of gaining popularity and those precious subscribers. And finally, the refresh phase, where your persona goes back to their studio, you get more funds, and you draw cards. It's a pretty simple game at its core with a nice play loop and a lot of complexity, even with only seeing 50 or so cards. This isn't going to be quite as intense as Magic, but there's enough there to already begin theory crafting. So with that information out of the way, let me talk about what I like. It's a position-based card game. I love controlling areas, denying opponents, and setting up sneaky plays that involve movement, and there haven't been a large amount of games that I enjoy who use these features. There was one moment during the play test where I set up a trick that allowed me to discard a card to move my persona between clashes, win a clash, which let me bring back that card to my hand, and discard it again to move again to the next clash. This being baked into the game is awesome, and if you like theory crafting weird, complicated turns to trick your opponents out of points, this game has got you covered. There's also plenty of ways through action cards to remove your opponent's resources, build up your own economy, or even sneak away with double points under certain conditions. There's also entire strategies built into cards around losing fights to gain resources. The second thing I love is your platform deck. These are what you and your opponent are fighting over, and they have their own abilities which you can tailor to your deck. If you're playing aggro, maybe you choose one that lets you put in content whenever you win a fight to keep the snowball rolling. If you're control, maybe you pick a higher value platform that takes more consecutive wins to conquer, slowing your opponent down. Having this secondary deck really adds another layer of complexity that I want in the game. Next, I love that they got the theme right. The 3 colors of cards represent different streaming platforms and have their own feel to them. In addition, calling the cards that stay on platforms content that continually fight to get you popularity really feels on point for the game. I'm very impressed that by playing the game, you get a small taste of streaming life through the card's effects. All of these points, combined with its playtime, make it an easy to pick up game for casual fans and a slightly more intense one for those that want a fun game. Now we're going to talk about some of my concerns, most of which are fixable as the game isn't technically out. In fact, it's going to be out on Kickstarter tonight. Link in the description if you want to check it out. And no, I'm not sponsored to say this yet.
Hey, this is Editing Rayless here. I just woke up and the game designers have told me that the cards I used during the playtest are different than what they're releasing. So this entire section might be completely wrong, and if they're changing things even at this stage, that's a really good sign. But in case they didn't change what I'm worried about, here you go.
Number 1, the economy. This was something I noticed during my game playing as Pippa, who had an economy generating trait whenever she wins a clash. There doesn't seem to be anything to do with funds if you have an excess, and the method of generating more funds per turn is tied to drawing upgrades from your deck. If one player starts the game with their upgrade, not only are they improving their influence immediately, the number of funds that they get goes from 3 to 4 for the first tier upgrade, which is a 33% increase in spending power to play all cards every turn. It would only take 3 3 turns to have made their money back, and having a static bonus power to their persona is very good by itself. In addition to that, their unique ability is upgraded, so for someone like Pippa who gets funds from winning, this can really put her ahead of the game. I'm not sure how this would feel across multiple games, but even though you can generate funds through other cards, this feels like something that might cause problems during regular gameplay simply due to the RNG of hitting those upgrades first. The only other character we have to compare to right now is Tenma, who lets you draw cards when she wins, which, by the way, some of those cards have discard abilities that let you gain funds. So in a game where funds pay for cards, draw power, as in most games, is king. Now, we did only get to play with a small portion of the cards, so this might be something you can fix with deck building, but it's a concern nonetheless. I'll keep an eye out to see how the rules pan out in its final version. Number 2 is the turn order. The way the game is played determines a first player that swaps between rounds. Currently, if you're the first player, you have to move your persona to a platform at the beginning of the turn, and then your opponent does. This might sound like a small gripe, but for some personas, winning early fights is what lets them build up their snowball, and most support cards, content, can only be played where your persona is. Therefore, if you know you're fighting an aggro deck and the way to slow it down is simply to fight it from turn 1 and you happen to be going second, guess what? You can now dump everything into denying your opponent's clash rewards and stall the game. I'm not entirely sure how to fix this problem, and it might not be as big of a one as I think it is, but this could be severely mitigated by deck building, cards that let you move around more often to avoid those first fights, or temp buffs to really get the ball rolling, etc. Number 3, the snowball. This ties into points 1 and 2. It feels like winning a fight or two early really gets the engine running, and there's not a lot your opponent can do about it once they fall behind. We noticed this effect quite drastically in our second game of the playtest, where I was Tenma and got an engine going super fast because I got my second upgrade very early. I was getting 5 funds per turn compared to my opponent's 3, while also drawing 2 extra cards whenever I won. Granted, I did get ahead through some sneaky moves, but at the end of it, it really felt like they weren't even playing the game, and that's not fun. I want the game to be fun so more people play it. This could just be an issue between the 2 personas we saw. It was mentioned others would have differing abilities, so it might have just been 2 aggro decks playing against each other, and when that happens, one side usually wins by a large margin because they got the ball rolling earlier. I'm curious what the rest of the cards will be to see if they help mitigate this problem. I have a couple other nitpicks about definitions of cards, like how discard should say discard this card, or how some cards really need timing added to them to make sense, like play this during a clash. But those are easy fixes, and I've already sent in my feedback. All in all, I'm genuinely excited for the game. I had a blast playing it. I made this whole video about it, and I hope you consider giving it a look. The first set is all about Phase Connect, and the second set will include a lot of indies, so there's going to be some good representation all around. If you're a fan of any of those VTubers, you can also get some of their pre-debut packs if you're attending the following conventions, and their Kickstarter is probably going live a couple hours after this video. I'm going to be keeping pretty close tabs on the game. I hope it becomes my new favorite, and I left a link to the playtest session stream if you want to see how it plays. Arbitrary rating, 8 out of 10. Good game. Check it out.